dass Sie gekommen sind. Der Raum ist überfüllt. Das hat mich sehr gefreut. Ich kann Deutsch, aber mein Englisch ist ein bisschen besser. That having been in Washington 52 years now, I've seen a lot of change. But there's one change that dwarfs all the other changes in importance, and that is that we no longer have, in any real sense, a free media, and that is big. That could not be bigger. Thomas Jefferson, he was asked, if you had a choice between a government and a free press, what would you choose? He said, no problem, free press. Because without a free press, you're going to get a dictator, okay? When I was stationed here, I could read the FAZ and find out what's going on. Right now, it's very different. I read the one over the weekend, and the Flüchtlinge, and nobody asks, warum ist die Flüchtlinge? Wir werden, our topic is, wie werden heute Kriege gemacht? Und a subtitle would be, wie werden heute Flüchtlinge gemacht? Alle Menschen haben die gleiche Rechte, you know? But to think about why these Flüchtlinge are here, that is dangerous, because it might talk about how the United States attacked Iraq and destroyed that country. It might talk about what's happened in Syria, how that country has been destroyed. 4 million Flüchtlinge from Iraq. 2 million had to leave their homes and stayed in Iraq, 2 million in the surrounding countries. Syria, again, 4 million. I mean, these boggle the mind. So please keep that in mind as we go through our little thing here about wie werden heute Kriege gemacht. The answer is pretty simple. Lügen. And we're going to be able to tell a little bit about the Lüge that we experienced when we saw our profession of intelligence analysis being corrupted for the express purpose of deceiving our elected representatives out of their constitutional prerogative to declare or otherwise authorize war. Well, it doesn't get any worse than that. This is what Nuremberg warned about, the Nuremberg Tribunal after World War II. They talked about a war of aggression, and they defined it. And they said a war of aggression, is the supreme international crime, differing from other war crimes only in so much as it contains the accumulated evil of the whole. Okay, accumulated evil of the whole. What could that mean? Could they mean like kidnapping people off the streets of Italy? Could they mean like moving them to black prisons hidden from sight? Or maybe torturing them? There's a lot of accumulated evil going on, folks, and we decided that we needed to blow the whistle on that, and we formed a little group called Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, and we started preparing memoranda for the President, as we used to do on active duty, so to speak. Memorandum for the President, subject, Iraq with Colin Powell's speech, that was our first memo, and from VIPS. So, lots of things happened before Iraq, and I was watching from afar, but the web being what it is, I could figure it out, my friends could figure out what was going on. There was great pressure on intelligence analysis to come up with the correct answers. And Elisabeth, my colleague here, had direct experience in this, and I've suggested that she might want to share the kind of pressure that she experienced as a branch chief, a very responsible job in one part of the agency. Would you be able to do that? Okay.
And in the weeks just prior to the war, my office received a call from the Office of Deputy Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz. And the request that I received from this office was that we should look in Iraqi media for the connection between Al-Qaeda and the government of Saddam Hussein. So when I received this request, we had to go out to our bureau in Amman, Jordan, where we monitored Iraqi media, and to all our other sort of contacts, media contacts in the Middle East, and we searched everywhere in Iraqi media for evidence of a link between Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein, and we found absolutely none. So I went back to Deputy Defense Secretary Wolfowitz and said, no, we don't have any evidence of that. And I thought that would be the end of things. But about 2 weeks later, our office received exactly the same request. Again, please find us the link between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda. So again, we exerted every effort. We pulled out all the stops, so to speak. And again, the response came back, sorry, we can't find anything. There's no evidence of this connection. So oddly enough, we kept getting this request until it became very evident to me that our office was not providing Wolfowitz with the correct answer. So this is just a small example of the kind of pressure that we were starting to come under, and I finally advised my superiors that I was going to go back to Mr. Wolfowitz's office and ask them, what is the original source of this allegation? Maybe it would help us in our search if you could tell us where you got this idea in the first place. And of course, the office of Paul Wolfowitz never got back to me on that. And that's just a small example of the kind of subtle political pressure that analysts within the CIA and in the intelligence community at large were starting to experience in the run-up to the war.
General Dempsey, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, also went to the President. And I remember that Saturday morning, right after Kerry sounded the death knell to Bashar al-Assad and said, we're in position and we have to retaliate, the President got up in the Rose Garden and said, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has told me that our warships are in position to attack Bashar al-Assad's government, but that there is no time sensitivity to this, and we can do that next week or the following week or next month. And so I'm going to Congress to ask for appropriate authorization. Wow! That was new. Who helped on that? Our colleagues, General Dempsey, and also the British, who for the first time in 3,050 years voted against the war. I exaggerate, but only a little bit, okay? You know, the British usually vote for war when people like Tony Blair say we got to do it. I'm a little prejudiced, I have to admit, because I'm Irish, okay? And my grandfather, my Irish grandfather, took me aside one time. He said, no, Raymond, do you know why the sun never sets on the British Empire? I said, yeah, I know. He said, you don't know. No, sit down and I'll tell you. He says, the sun never sets on the British Empire because the good Lord would never trust the British in the dark. Now, who has the black boxes from the Malaysian aircraft? Anybody know? The British. Why do the British have the boxes for the Malaysian aircraft? You know, that really stinks. And while I'm on the subject, our colleagues were able to prevent John Kerry from getting up and saying, I have an intelligence assessment that said the pro-Russians knocked down that plane. And so we didn't get an intelligence assessment. We got something called a government assessment. A new genre, new animal, okay? What does that mean? That means it was prepared at the White House by the intelligence community. So on those two issues, the Syrian gas thing and MH17, I'm proud of our fellow analysts for stepping up and saying, Mr. President, it ain't the way John Kerry said it was. And when John Kerry bragged in September of 2013 that the moderate rebels were gaining strength in Syria, and they were able to, they were just on the verge of really making a terrific advance, no one believed that. No one in Washington believed that. And besides, he accused the Syrians again of doing the poison gas. So what happened? Well, the next day, Obama arrived in Petersburg for a summit. And that same day, Mr. Putin felt that he had to comment on John Kerry, and he said, "On врет, on знает, что врет." Это печально, which means he's lying, he knows he's lying. This is really sad. So as Obama arrives in Petersburg, Putin, now I've never heard a Soviet president or general secretary call our Secretary of State a liar before, but clearly Putin thought he had the goods on anything, and he knew, I believe, that Obama knew also that Kerry tended to, like we say, exaggerate. Now, today we're having the ISIS thing, right? Okay, and everybody's trying to figure out, well, what about ISIS? What should we do? Should we drone them to death, or what should we do? And we have the kind of situation now where the intelligence community, the honest ones, are preparing papers that are being changed around. That the drone warfare is doing two things. It's increasing the recruitment lines behind Al-Qaeda and ISIS recruiting stations, and it's endangering, it's creating more war for all of us. And the generals are saying, oh, we're beginning to win now, we've stopped ISIS, and so this is really, really important, because this has hit the press now. 50 intelligence analysts have complained to the Department of Defense Inspector General, saying, yeah, we write this stuff, we do our best to do an honest job, and then the generals falsify our conclusions. Do you remember what I said about Vietnam? Well, it's happening again. And the good news, of course, is there are these analysts that are speaking out, and somebody must have leaked it to the press. The bad news is that the mainstream media is so corrupt that they take dictation, they take notes from what the White House Sprecher says, and they publish that in the New York Times the next day. And so Americans are completely bereft of information. I had a very educated, a very astute gentleman ask me the other day, why did the Russians shoot down that plane over Ukraine? Now, I have to say, 90% of Americans believe the Russians did it. Why? Because that's what they're told by the mainstream media. So we're trying to break through that. The good news is we have a fifth estate now, which is up in the ether somewhere, but I know I can get reliable information out of it. And when we talk about the big decisions that have to be made now, and here in Germany, well, if the war in ISIS is not only going well for us, in other words, if we're not stopping ISIS, but rather counterproductively bombing this and that, or droning this or that, what does it mean? That means that the generals are going to have their 30 years war. I couldn't believe that our generals are talking about a 30 years war. They have no sense of history, that's clear. And they're saying, maybe the Westphalian Treaty to put an end to the kinds of 30 years war we're going to have. So, what will happen? Well, this thing will just escalate. And as soon as a lot of people in the Near East learn that we couldn't do the drones without Ramstein, Ramstein is the sine qua non. It's what we need. We can't go somewhere else for a lot of physical reasons and for technical reasons. We couldn't do it on the North Pole or in London or any other place because of the curvature of the Earth. And the reason we can, look, or they have these so-called pilots look down from their screens and say, oh, that guy looks like, that looks like a terrorist right there. 2 seconds, he's dead, okay? Or his Hyundai is dead, or whoever has his Hyundai is dead, okay? This would add a couple of seconds more if they had it. It would be very expensive to move. I don't know who would take them. But so Ramstein, it's really central to all this. And Ramstein is, as I've been told here, German Hoheitsgebiet. Okay?